help of Allah. And I tell you what it is. It is my and your actions. It is my and your actions. Because we have to be people of character. People should see our character. How often do you see people who have a good character and they start practicing and now they don't want to give anybody salam anymore? The Prophet ﷺ said, none of you can enter into Jannah until he believes. And none of you can be a believer until he loves his Muslim brother. And shall I tell you a way of increasing that love? Give each other salam. Love your Muslim brother. But for us, everything divides us. The smallest thing divides us. We can always find something to divide us. You know, you come from Africa, you come from the Middle East, we come from the subcontinent, and if that's not good enough, you come from Bangladesh, I come from Pakistan, and if that's not good enough, then we go closer. You come from Sarhad, I come from Karachi, and if that's not good enough, then you belong to the Jat Bradri, you belong to this family, I belong to this family. You can always find things to divide us. You come from Somalia, I come from Pakistan, I come from Gujarat. You can always find things to divide you. But why don't we speak about those things which unite us? And what is that? It's La ilaha illallah. That's what unites us. And therefore, my dear respected brothers and sisters, and seriously speaking, we have to be people of actions. We have to contribute towards our society. We have to put positively back into our society. We were a nation whose first revelation was Iqra. Read. And you look at how illiterate our youngsters are. How illiterate our youngsters are. How do you expect the help of Allah to descend? You look at our areas. Some Muslim areas, 50-60% of women don't even know their fard of ghusl. These are mothers, these are wives. They cook and clean for their children all their life. They cook. How are you going to have barakah in your house when you have women who don't even know how to purify themselves? All their lives they go spend in a state of impurity. And when they die and they are given the bath, they are given the ghusl, this is the only time that they become pure. How do you expect the help of Allah to descend? And therefore I say one thing. You know, one thing, first step we need to take is that we need to create some muhabba and ulfa amongst us. You know, often you hear brothers speaking about, often you hear speakers speaking about unity. You know, they speak about, we need to unite. But you know, often the statements are very disingenuous. Because it means you have to unite on my worldview. And that's what unity is. As long as you conform to what I believe in, that's what unity is. Now we know that people are always had different outlooks. Abu Bakr had a different outlook to Umar ibn al-Khattab. And if Abu Bakr and Umar argued about every issue, Islam wouldn't have gone past Medina. You know, they had different approaches, but the approach was within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the ulama have defined what the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is. Now, as long as the difference are within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we should carry on. Because there are other forces trying to divide us, and really we are falling into the trap. You know, before it was, division. You're a Wahhabi, I'm a Salafi, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Sufi. You know, all kind of divisions. But it's gone past that now, isn't it? Now other people are dividing you. They're giving you terminologies. So you're a moderate Muslim. You're a lefty Muslim. You're a conservative Muslim. You're a right-wing Muslim. And people are giving you all these new labels. And you know, often we adopt these labels. We adopt them. Just to define and defend our irreligious disposition. So we see a brother who prays 5 times a day, who's got a beard, who wears a thobe. And you know, we can't do it. So what do? We want to feel good about ourselves. So he said, bro, he's a bit fanatic, isn't he? He's a bit hardcore, isn't he? You know why? Because we want to feel good about our own self. A sister wears a hijab or a niqab. And then you have other sisters who don't want to do it. But they want to feel good about their own Islam. Oh, she's really conservative, isn't she? She don't speak to men anymore. Because they want to justify the irreligious disposition. And let me give you an example, maybe a tangible example. You know, and maybe you Sufis don't know, but Sufi Sahib Junaid Baghdadi, you know, the current Miss England, I'm not sure if she's current, but the one last, she was a Muslim. She's known as to be a Muslim. She regards herself as a Muslim. Now, you never heard before that, oh, the Miss England is a Christian, is a Catholic, is a Protestant, is a Hindu, is a Jew. But as soon as she's a Muslim, and you know, in the current climate, even if she looked like the back of a bus, they would have chose her. Because they want to bring you out of your closet. Now, she was on a political show speaking about Islam and terrorism. And before you guys start saying that Maulana checks out Miss England, somebody told me this. That's a disclaimer. Now, she was on this political show speaking about Islam and terrorism. And somebody, you know, she's relating an incident where she was at this contest and she met Miss Lebanon. And Miss Lebanon asked her, why aren't you wearing a swimsuit? Why aren't you wearing a bikini? Why are you wearing a swimsuit? And she said, the reason I'm wearing a swimsuit is because I'm a Muslim. So, Miss Lebanon in her bikini said, I'm a Muslim as well. So can you understand the lesson from this story? Not to speak about Miss England and Miss Lebanon, but can you understand where Miss Lebanon stands? Miss England, for not wearing a bikini, wearing a swimsuit, is a bit conservative. And where those sisters wear a hijab and a niqab to Miss England, our right-wingers are very, very conservative. Because it depends where you stand. And Allah defined this ummah as an ummatun wasata. A moderate ummah. This is what we are. We are a moderate ummah. And what defines our moderation? It is Allah and His Rasools. And nothing else. It's not what you feel like. It is what Allah and His Rasool define. And how Islam has been understood for the last 1400 years. Because the reality is, if the Sahaba didn't understand Islam, the Salaf didn't understand Islam, for 1400 years they didn't understand Islam. You guys in Whitechapel, London are not going to understand Islam. Simple as that. You're not going to understand Islam. And therefore, my dear respected brothers and sisters, you know, we need to be heavy in the scales of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to be people of actions. The Prophet ﷺ said in a narration related by Imam Muslim in his Sahih, on the day of judgment, a man will come, he will be a rajulu saminul azim. He will be a huge fat man, massive weight. He will be huge, a fat man. But in the scales of Allah, you know how much he will weigh? Have you ever thought what Abu Bakr looked like? Have you ever imagined how Abu Bakr was? A man who through thick and thin sided with the Prophet ﷺ. This man must have been massive. He must have been huge. The narration mentioned Umar and Khalid bin Walid was so huge that when they would sit on the horse, their feet would nearly touch the floor. Can you imagine? And they would say that Abu Bakr was even braver than these two. So what did Abu Bakr look like? His daughter Aisha radiallahu anha mentions, my father Abu Bakr was so thin that his trousers wouldn't remain around his waist. He was so thin that his eyes had sunk out and his cheekbones were protruding. He was so thin that you could see the bones on his finger. And when he would walk with a stoop. He would walk with a stoop. This is how thin Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu was. But they would say that Abu Bakr was the weakest in body, but when it came to the commands of Allah, he was the strongest. Upon occasion, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was climbing a tree, and he had very thin shins. And the Sahaba, they looked at his thin shins and they began to laugh. And the Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba, he said, what's making you laugh? And they said, the thin shins of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And the Prophet ﷺ said, by Allah, if these thin shins were placed in one side of the scale, on the day of judgment, and the mountain of Uhud was placed on the other side of the scale, these thin shins would be heavier than the mountain of Uhud.
Why? Because every pound, every muscle, every vein was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said,